this is Alex for the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. For more videos like this, be sure to hit like and subscribe, and find our weekly Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts.
So, guys, looking at it, we've got a team to still break down this week, and it is time for the Detroit Lions. They finished at 3-12-1 this past year. The head coach, Matt Patricia, the offensive coordinator, Darrell Bevell, and Corey Undlin just becoming their defensive coordinator. They had a 58% pass, 42% run mix this past year. We'll go ahead and move on to the wide receivers, and they've got a few of them up there in Detroit. So we'll break down the fantasy relevance of Kenny Galladay, my apologies, Marvin Jones Jr. and Danny Amendola. Looking at those three, Kenny Galladay, we'll start with him, was wide receiver 9 on the year, had 65 receptions, 116 targets, had 1,190 yards and 11 TDs. They've got him ranked at wide receiver 9 this coming year, top 20 overall talent. What are you guys thinking here?
Again, I think I'm pretty comfortable with that. I think Galladay, I think he could finish as a top 10 receiver again. I do think that's entirely possible. I think that's probably a good range, somewhere between that, 8 to 12 range is kind of where I see him. So either just in or just outside of that top 10. So I'm sure that's going to buffer with what you're going to ask us next here, Derek. But
top 10, yes or no?
Yeah, exactly. But I think I'm comfortable with that. He is. If you're going a double running back front for some reason, Galladay is a potential guy that could slide to you. Not that he will, but he's a guy that you could target for a slide down to you. Or on the flip side, on the projections, if things hold serve and you decide to take Christian McCaffrey with the first overall pick, Galladay is a guy that could come back up to you on the turn and be there at the bottom end of the second round. So I see the value in that. And it's still, as much as I say that, I don't know that I would want to trust him as my number one receiver on my fantasy team. He has some really good weeks, but as far as a consistency rating, he had a couple weeks where he just disappeared. And when I'm looking at a number one wide receiver for fantasy, it's the floor just as much as it is the ceiling, right? And Galladay has that ceiling potential. We've seen it, and really whether it was with David Blau or Matt Stafford, but the floor is what scares me, and how it could be a Galladay week and he could go gangbusters, or he could have one catch for 11 yards and all of a sudden Marvin Jones has 6 catches, 126 yards and 3 touchdowns, and you're left scratching your head.
Right.
So that scares me a little bit. Top 10, I'm going to say no, just outside the top 10. I do think that's pretty accurate as far as the early rankings for Kenny Galladay.
What round you got him going in? Second?
Yeah, I think most people are probably going to end up picking him in the second. I think that's probably a good consensus round for him.
Okay, I was in on Kenny Galladay, and Kevin, everything that you were saying, I was yes, right there with you, everything. And then I looked up targets per game, and I don't like what I saw targets per game. Targets per game on this particular website that I'm looking at, 7.25 targets per game this last year.
Alex, I'll take that a step further for you. He only had 2 games in which he reached double-digit targets on the year. Week 2, he had 10 targets, and Week 16, he had 12 targets. There was no other point in the year, regardless of who the quarterback was, where he saw more than 10 targets, and he played all 16 games.
Well, okay, so to my point then, he was efficient in his targets. I mean, he averaged 75 yards a game, and on 7 targets, that's pretty damn effective. he's picking up a first down every time he's catching the football, which is great. You're going to need that in a fantasy player, but especially out of a fantasy receiver. But I want somebody who's going to be seeing the football a little bit more and have more possibility of getting me bigger points. This is your floor versus your ceiling, Kevin. And his floor and ceiling to me are right next to each other because on his high end, he's going to be great because he's going to be efficient with what he gets. But on his low end, he's still going to get you enough points because he's going to be efficient with what he gets. It's just that he's not going to see the football a ton. So I'm going to say that he is not a top 10 fantasy wide receiver. I do think that he's going to get taken as a wide receiver 1, which is what he's going to be listed at anyways. But I don't see him being a top 10 wide receiver this year, which pains me because he spent a year at the University of North Dakota and before transferring. But yeah, based solely on quarterback play, which is, wide receivers, they're handicapped to whoever's throwing them the football. So I will go no on Kenny Golladay being a top 10 receiver. I still think he gets taken in the second round, third round. He's a second or third round guy, but I don't know that that's going to be a wise decision for people that do that.
I am 100% in on everything that both of you just said. I've got him second round. No, I don't see him being a top 10 pick. A top 10 receiver. I do see him as a second overall pick to it. But a lot of that has to do with the, everything we just mentioned consistency-wise. The problem with Kenny Golladay is, and it's a little weird to see because we had such a discrepancy at quarterback this year. Next year, I think it'll be a different story. Matt Stafford should be back, should be healthy, and we'll see a little bit more of a stabilizing force there. However, all of that being said, he doesn't see the target share, even though he sees 20% of the overall target share for the Lions. The Lions this past year ran the ball a decent amount. A lot of these other teams are well north of 60% of a pass to run ratio. The Lions were one of the few that were under a 60% ratio there for these cellar dweller type of teams, which really doesn't make a lot of sense because they trailed a lot of games. You should have seen them having more targets go out there, should have been throwing the ball more, and that didn't happen. And I don't know that that's going to change going forward either. So I think he is going to be a very much a flash, a flash or a flood. Like he's either going to raise your boat and win you a week, or he could be a wide receiver 1 that loses you the week.
I'll also say this, as we look at it, his receptions per game this year, and I think a lot of this has to deal with the fact that Stafford didn't play, and there wasn't a rapport between those two. But he was right behind Danny Amendola on this website that I'm looking at. He was right behind Danny Amendola in receptions per game. They each averaged 4 and some change. But I think that's David Blau playing into the later part of the season. I think that hurt Kenny Golladay. I think if we've got a healthy Stafford, I think there's a rapport there between those two. He probably will be a little bit more efficient than what these numbers say this last year. But I still don't think he's a top 10 receiver, and I still think he's going to get drafted higher than he should.
Agreed. So Marvin Jones Jr., he finished the year wide receiver 28 on the year. 63 receptions, 91 targets, a 16% target share, 779 yards and 9 touchdowns. They've got him going into this draft at position 48 and 98 overall. So guys, is he going to be a top 40 receiver this year? And what round do you have him going in?
I'm going to say yes for Marvin Jones being a top 40 receiver. I think the volume's there. Matt Stafford does like to spread it around a little bit. I think his floor is high enough, again, to get within those numbers. I think he's going to be sitting somewhere in the, 850 yards or so and, 5-6 touchdown area. I think he's a possible flex depending on how you're drafting. Maybe not my cup of tea necessarily, but he does have some value. If nothing else, he's a great asset to have on your bench because he is the next man up. If Galladay were to go down, he is clearly the next man up in that offense, and then the target share does kind of zero in on him. So if you're set, he's a great guy to have on your bench. Yes, top 40 receiver, albeit maybe barely, and drafting him in rounds 7-ish. We'll say 7.
Okay.
Yeah, I am right there with you. He is almost or just barely a top 40 receiver. I think I would take, he's kind of in that, and how he finished this last year. He's in that Will Fuller, Marvin Jones, Sterling Shepard, DK Metcalf, like all those guys right next to each other, right? That's kind of how they finished the year this year, regular season at least. I think that that's where you are with those guys. They're all the same. I'm good with yes, he will be a top 40, and I'm saying he's in that 7, 8, 9 range. And to your point, Kevin, an excellent handcuff if you take Galladay to have that guy as a backup, because you never know what's going to happen.
I'm going to average your 7, 8, 9 out and just say it was 8.
8, yeah.
So I'm right there with you. I've got him 8th round. Yes, I think he sneaks inside of that top 40, because I think that what you saw this year is about what you're going to see going forward, especially with the return of Stafford to it. Guys, Danny Amendola finished wide receiver 49 on the year, 62 catches, 97 targets, 17% target share, 678 yards, 1 touchdown. They've got him position 48, 230. Do you guys really have any thoughts on old Danny Amendola?
Depending on roster depth, he's a late round pickup at best. If you're playing shallow rosters, like a traditional Yahoo or ESPN type league where you're only having bench spots of 7 deep or something like that, I think in most cases he goes undrafted, and then you stream him or use him as a bye week fill in or something like that. But overall, in most cases, I don't believe he will have a tremendous fantasy relevance.
Yeah, Danny Amendola's best value was once it was clear that he and David Blau had something going there towards the end of the year. That was his best fantasy relevance towards the end of last season, when it was clear that he and Blau had something going. I would not draft a Danny Amendola, especially if you have short rosters. He is somebody that is a waiver wire pickup if you're desperate. So what was the question that you posed, Derek?
It wasn't even a question. Is he drafted is the question.
No.
Okay, I've got him undrafted as well. TJ Hawk.
Alrighty, guys, that'll do it for the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. That'll wrap up another episode. Thank you for joining us. Make sure that you are following us on the Twitter at Good Old Boys FF. You can also find us on YouTube with the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football channel. Facebook, we are at Good Old Boys FF. If you haven't done so, be sure to click the like and subscribe button. We'd also love for you to hit the rating and subscribe button to wherever you're listening to this podcast now. For Kevin and Alex, I'm Derek.